Oftentimes, when we read books with someone telling us what that book says. And many times it actually makes it easier to read the book, especially if we're being taught correctly how to read the book, because whenever we read ancient books, you sort of got to get brought up to speed on how to read them. Unfortunately, when it comes to the Bible, we tend to forget that. We tend to just forget that these are ancient documents written to specific people at specific times. I often say the Bible was not written to you and me, but it was written for you and me. And so when we come to the book of Revelation, especially in America the last couple hundred years, we've been conditioned that the way you read that book is that it is a future book. That's the way we read it. There's no way for us to even begin to think that that book could have been a prophecy that was written before something happened that has now already been fulfilled. So it would fit the prophetic nature of the book. It would just fit it in terms of it has been fulfilled. Much like when we read Daniel and Ezekiel or Jeremiah or any of the Joel or whoever, we read certain things and we see those things as having been fulfilled. And then there's other things that maybe we don't think have been fulfilled. But there's parts of the Bible that we read and we go, oh yeah, that's been fulfilled. We get that. The question is, when we come to the book of Revelation, one of the questions I get is how can you say that the book of Revelation is something that for the most part has happened? And the reason the kickback comes is because we've been conditioned to read it as a futuristic book. The book itself says to the people it was written to that the events would happen quickly. There's no literary convention that would say if you got that letter and you read it, and you were told that the events would happen quickly, that would mean that it was 2,000 years from when it was written. We can't do that. Ben Witherington, a great scholar, says that it's almost the pride and arrogance of American Christianity to think that the book of Revelation could mean something to the person reading it right now that there's no way it couldn't have meant to the person who was reading it back then. And I think that's true. What the book of Revelation is doing is it's telling the readers that read it at the time that the temple is going to be destroyed. Now, it does have future parts to it, as a lot of prophecy does, where it says, God will judge, but then afterwards he'll do great things to Israel. The book of Revelation has that judgment that comes, and then we see the glories of 21 and 22 of what the future will look like for those of us who believe. But when we read the book of Revelation, what we fail to do is to see the background of that book. We're reading it as a future book. So, what are the seals and what are the trumpets, as if we think those have to be things that were fulfilled yet future. Really what the book of Revelation is a retelling of the book of Joshua. The book of Joshua, as you know, is part of it is written about the fall of Jericho, a city that was walled up against heaven and earth, and the walls came crashing down. And of course, you remember the 7 days and the 7 walk around, and then the 7th day of the 7th deal blowing the trumpets, and then the walls fell. The book of Revelation is borrowing from Joshua and telling us the story again. And once we get that, we can sort of understand how this is read. So in Joshua, we're told that Joshua meets the commander of the Lord's host in chapter 5 of Joshua, and he falls at his feet. And he's got a sword that's drawn. And he tells Joshua that he needs to get the people prepared for holy war. So Joshua gets them prepared for holy war. And if you remember, he sends 2 spies into the city. And who's in the city that they meet? They meet a whore named Rahab. And of course, she takes them in, and she has the power of life and death over those spies because she could have turned them in, but instead they sort of bury themselves under sort of the thatch and mud, which is emblematic of death and resurrection, and then they lower down and they go back. When they come back, what do? Well, they come to the city, and for 7 days they walk around the city. What God's showing them is that they have no ability to take the city on their own, which is exactly what they would do in siege warfare. They would walk around the city to see how they were going to take it. Well, they had no ability to take it. They were walking around realizing there's no way we can take the city. But on the 7th day, they do 7 journeys, and then they blow the trumpets. And what happens? The walls fall of the city. But before the city can be destroyed, Rahab and her family have to come out of the city. So if you're Rahab and you hear the trumpets blowing, it is an incredible sound because you know your deliverance is coming. If you're in the city and you're not with Rahab, it's terror, it's fear. So they blow the trumpets, the walls fall, and Rahab comes out, and of course she marries Salmon into the righteous line of Christ that she's mentioned in Matthew 1. So the whore becomes a royal bride. Okay, so in the book of Revelation, what you have is sort of the similar teaching here because it's using Joshua as the backdrop. John falls at the feet of the Lord as dead, and what comes out of his mouth is a sword. The difference is Joshua and them that they kill with a sword. Jesus subdues the whole world, the whole cosmos with the word, his word, not by fighting, not by violence, but by his word. And so what does he do? Well, the next couple of chapters are the churches getting themselves ready. This repent, get right, get ready, which mirrors the Joshua getting the people ready for holy war. And what do we find in the book of Revelation? We find a city that is walled up against God. And the city, we're told what it is in Revelation 11:8. We're told that it's Jerusalem. What happens? Well, we mirror the telescopic sevens of Joshua, which is coming to the judgment of the temple. What's going to happen? The temple's going to be destroyed. The walls are going to fall. But before the temple can be completely, destroyed, what has to happen? Well, it says that when the trumpet blasts and the walls fall, a great voice says, "Come out of her, my people." The people that come out of Jerusalem become the bride, the royal bride espoused to Christ. The vision here is not a vision of 2,000 years in the future. The vision is of the temple being measured for judgment, Romans 11, and it was measured, it was destroyed, and that is what the book of Revelation says is going to be coming quickly up on people. And so the ending of Revelation 21 and 22 is still yet future. But it's the problem that we have of reading that book with an indoctrination. If we can push those things aside and read it for what it is and read it as a first century Jewish person would have read it, I think the book becomes much more clear to us today.